Can we trust a religious apologist to tell us what atheism means? Well, of course not. I wouldn't trust them to tell me what time it was. But once you realize how dishonest they are, and that they know full well just how dishonest they're being, you can never look at this crap the same way again. So let's go watch an example. This time out, we're going back to Answers in Genesis Canada. Not for a creationism video because I'm tired of that kind of thing, and frankly, there's plenty of people out there who are debunking that part of it, so we're not going to bother. No, we're going to let our apologist tell us what atheism is. You know, that thing that they clearly don't have the slightest clue about. Yeah, but what else is new? So let's see just how poorly they perform, which, if past experience is any indication, that will be very, very, very poorly indeed.
Does atheist mean there is no God or a lack of belief in God?
It means whatever the particular person who is using that label thinks that it means for them. For me, it's a lack of belief in gods. It's in the word itself. Theism is the belief in a god or gods of some sort. I am an atheist. A is without. Theos is a belief in gods. That's what the word means. Do the Greek. However, if someone else chooses to use the word to mean a direct belief that there are no gods, that's up to them. That's entirely fine. I might disagree, and certainly there's a discussion that can be had, but far be it from me to tell anyone else how they're allowed to use words. Linguistics is descriptive, not prescriptive. It describes how people use the words and not what the words actually mean. But I doubt he's going to recognize that moving forward, but I guess we'll see.
Hi, Calvin Smith here, and welcome to Creation Basics, where our goal is to make God's creation part of your everyday conversation.
Except, what does atheism have to do with creation? In fact, they spend a lot of time on this channel talking about things other than creation, all lumped together under Creation Basics. And I don't get the connection myself, but I also don't understand what goes on in the addled mind of the religious. Anyway, let's just move on and hope that he gets to something worthwhile. But, I wouldn't be holding my breath.
Now, today's question, does atheism mean not believing God exists or just having a lack of belief in God? Now, have you ever had an atheist say this? That they're not saying they believe God doesn't exist. It's just that they lack a belief in God or gods. It's pretty common amongst atheists these days, where it actually didn't used to be so much.
Whether you like it or not, word usages evolve over time. Welcome to the real world. I think some of it comes from the fact that the religious were trying desperately to shift the burden of proof over to atheists, like, if you can't prove we're wrong, then we're automatically right. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's not getting you anywhere. You're the ones making the claims here, not us. We're just telling you that we're not convinced that the claims that you're making are factually true, based on the gross lack of anything remotely identifiable as evidence that you have presented for your side. And I'm sure he's going to make the standard excuses for that down the line too, because that's what they all do, especially differentiating between atheist and agnostic, because that's something else that they try to do. But let's watch and see.
And there's a definite reason why they've changed this classical definition of an atheist, which is atheos, no God. That's what it means. And that's a definite statement. You believe God doesn't exist.
Except it doesn't. In fact, I gave what is the actual definition of the a prefix, but let's present it here just to clear things up. It denotes being without a particular characteristic, in this case, theism, the belief in gods. It means that the atheist is not a theist. That's it. That's all. It is not the negation of theism. It is the rejection of theism or theistic claims. Please learn to do the Greek. It can't be that hard.
See, atheists will often say they just lack a belief in God the way they lack belief in sprites or fairies or invisible purple unicorns. In other words, they're saying atheism isn't an actual intellectual position where they're making an absolute commitment or statement towards a specific worldview.
Because we're not. It is exactly the same as not being convinced that sprites or leprechauns exist. I'm not saying that there absolutely can't be any such thing as leprechauns. I'm saying I haven't seen sufficient evidence to convince me that it is reasonably or rationally true that the claim that leprechauns are real is real. Am I open to the possibility? Sure. I just have to be convinced, and that puts the burden of proof right back on the adherent where it belongs, because they're the ones making the claims that such a thing is real, not me. I'm not saying it's not real, but I don't believe that it is. I don't accept it because I haven't been convinced. And this goes for any claim at all. I reject God claims for the same reason that I reject Bigfoot claims or alien abduction claims or magical pixie claims. It hasn't been demonstrated to be objectively true to my satisfaction. Of course, they hate that because they know on some basic level, I think, that they have absolutely nothing at all of substance to present that would convince a rational person. They believe it for emotional reasons, and they expect that to be enough, and when it isn't, they look for an excuse so they can go right back to believing non-evidentially and pass the blame on to others. These people, they are not bright. But let's let them keep digging their own hole.
They're actually saying that they have no position concerning God, so don't you dare accuse them of saying they believe that God doesn't exist. Well, let's break this down into 2 points here. I mean, number 1, why the change in terminology? And 2, is this an actual tenable position? Well, number 1's easy. I mean, why the switch up here? Well, if you have no position, how can you be attacked on your position? Anyone that's watched a politician for more than a few minutes has kind of seen this type of mumbo jumbo before, right? That the person just keeps talking and saying a lot of words, but they never seem to say or come to any kind of real commitment, so that later on, if someone accuses them of backing a certain point of view, well, they just kind of deny it and say, well, you know, it was pretty vague earlier on. They don't have to commit to anything. Well, that's a defense mechanism being employed.
No, the defense mechanism is on your side. We're just being honest. We don't believe in something that hasn't been coherently demonstrated to actually exist. It isn't us that's coming up with the idea of gods. That's you people. So let's do an experiment. Let's just make something up that nobody has ever heard of before. Zippo the Wonder God. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. So if somebody walks up to you on the street and asks if you believe in Zippo the Wonder God, what are you going to say? Yes? Why in the world would you do that? You've never seen any reason to believe that Zippo the Wonder God is real. In fact, in the moment, you don't have a clue what Zippo the Wonder God might even be. So the only coherent answer that you could give is no, you don't. Yet, that doesn't mean that you believe that Zippo isn't real. You have no information at all on that. You can't demonstrate the non-existence any more than you can demonstrate the existence. All you can do is lack a position either way until more information is provided. And that's all atheists are doing. We're waiting for the believers to present us with more information that corroborates their claims, and they happen to be really, really bad at that. No matter how often we ask, they don't come up with anything substantive. They just want it to be true without ever being able to present any evidence that it is. That's a problem on the religious side. That has nothing at all to do with us.
What they're trying to do by stating they lack belief is to protect their worldview from being open to attack and cross-examination. No pun intended, cross-examination, but anyway.
No, it's an accurate representation of what's really going on. The problem is, the religious get really tired of being the ones in the hot seat all the time, being the ones making the positive claims, therefore they're trying to shift the burden of proof to somebody else. Their beliefs are true until proven false, instead of being empty until proven true. And that's their problem, not ours. They have absolutely no way to prove that any of it is true at all. Religion being an entirely emotional position, not an intellectual one. It is based on no objectively verifiable information whatsoever. It is based on fifis, not facts. Even if we were doing what he's saying, which of course isn't the case, that still doesn't remove the burden of proof from his side. He still has the obligation to put up or shut up, and he doesn't know how to do either one. So stop making excuses and just do it already.
Here's the problem with point number 2. And this is the question to ask the atheist that says this. What is it that you lack belief in? Make them explain it. Do you lack a belief in Allah, the Gitche Manitou, the one true God of the Bible? What is God that you lack belief in like? Prompt them. Is it the God you believe in supposed to have the power to create the universe? Yes or no?
I lack any positive belief toward any God concept that has so far been presented to me based on the complete lack of corroboratory evidence presented by any believer. Atheism is just a blanket word that covers all gods. You can't be an atheist and believe in one or more gods, period. You have to reject them all without exception. Otherwise, you're not an atheist, you're a theist. But I'm not the one that comes up with any of the characteristics for these supposed gods. That's you people. I just listen to your explanations, and I am either convinced by them, or I am not. And as it currently stands, I am not. You don't have to like that. It doesn't matter at all. It means nothing to me whether you like the fact that I don't believe you. It still remains true. And it's why I don't tell you what your gods are like. You tell me. It's bizarre that they don't understand how any of this works. But these are some pretty bizarre people, aren't they?
Does the God you lack belief in supposedly set the moral absolutes? Yes or no? You see, saying you have a lack of belief may sound like it makes sense to someone until you realize that once you're introduced to an idea, you can't be neutral towards it. You begin making judgments about the concepts that you're being exposed to. You can consider it's plausible, accepted, think it's nuts, crazy, rejected, or whatever. Maybe you need more information to come to a definite conclusion. But you can't just say any longer that you lack a belief in it, because it isn't it. It's defined to some extent a concept, so you can't lack a belief in it anymore the way you're trying to frame it.
So what is your position on Zippo the Wonder God anyhow? Now, you might need more information given the fact that at the moment, you haven't got the slightest clue what this thing is supposed to be in any way, shape, or form. But in this exact moment, what is your position on it? Do you take an active belief that it exists? Or, as you seem to insist, do you take an active belief that it doesn't exist? That's the dichotomy that you're trying to argue. You either believe that it exists positively, or you believe that it doesn't exist positively. Make sure that for whichever one of those you come up with, you stand ready to explain how you came to that conclusion rationally. Atheists are in the position of not having enough information for coming to any kind of a rational conclusion based on these claims. We know what you claim about your gods, but you haven't demonstrated any methodology for how you came to that information coherently. From where we're sitting, it looks like you just yanked it completely out of your butthole. We have no reason whatsoever to take anything that you say seriously, and the more that we point that out, the less credible information you seem capable of providing. We're just trying to get you to a place where we can make a decision. That's not our problem, that's yours. Maybe you ought to try to do better.
Now, even after explaining this, some atheists are still going to say that they can lack a belief in things even after being exposed to the idea, but that's not true. If I were to say to one of my younger grandkids, that I believe in the flying spaghetti monster, and this child had zero concept of what a flying spaghetti monster was and had no previous awareness of it. Well, the flying spaghetti monster, then that I explained, is supposedly invisible and created the universe and lives outside of space and time. They would now have knowledge about that concept, and they've got to either accept that or reject it or say they need more information to determine whether, flying spaghetti monsters exist, whatever.
And there, you've just shown that you do understand the problem, because you now provide 3 options instead of the typical 2. Atheists require information that you people seem incapable of providing. Now, it would be one thing if it was just a concept. The flying spaghetti monster is just a concept, an example made up out of whole cloth to show the religious what they're doing wrong. Nobody in their right mind thinks it's actually real. The religious want to pretend that their gods are real, and that's the bit of information that we're waiting for. That's what we're looking for you to provide. The proof that these things actually exist in objective reality that we all share. You might want to get on that. Just saying.
And you can try to play word games and say not having enough information to make the decision as to whether the flying spaghetti monster exists, equals being an atheist towards it. But that's actually called being an agnostic, not a true atheist.
Yep, I knew we'd get there eventually, because this is just word games on the part of the theist. They don't understand what any of these words mean, nor do they care. They're using these words as weapons, not as any way to have a legitimate conversation. Somehow, agnostic is a softer sounding word than atheist, even though they mean very much the same thing in practice in this context. Neither of them believe in your God. It's just a way to spin it to your followers so they get comforted and you don't actually have to acknowledge that there are people out there, an ever-increasing number of people, that don't agree with your emotionally driven faith. Ultimately, though, it just doesn't matter. If they're after convincing people that they're right and increasing the number of adherents and bringing people to Christ, then agnostics, they don't get them anywhere useful. Agnostics still don't believe. They're still in the same boat, whichever word they use, which is why this is so patently dishonest for them to pull. So the next time a theist says, well, you're an agnostic, not an atheist, just laugh in their face. They're just showing that they're complete idiots.
You see, the root of the word atheist reveals the fallacy. Atheos means no God.
No, it means without a belief in gods, as I already showed. Almost like Calvin here doesn't have the slightest clue what the hell he's talking about. That couldn't be the case, could it? Nah.
So does the term atheist mean you believe there is no God? Well, if used correctly, yes it is, and yes it does. People that misuse it should call themselves agnostics.
And that's wrong, because agnosticism and Gnosticism, they deal with knowledge or the availability of knowledge, and atheism and theism, those deal with beliefs. Do you believe in a God, yes or no? And that makes you an atheist or a theist. Do you claim to know that a God exists? Or do you think it is possible to know that a God exists? Yes or no? That makes you an agnostic or a Gnostic. 2 different ideas with 2 different definitions, and anybody with an ounce of linguistic honesty would know that, but the religious don't do that, do they? Because Calvin isn't sitting there looking smug because he's teaching a masterclass in linguistic accuracy. He's there trying to con the rubes and make a buck off the back of the religiously gullible. Because here's the truth that the religious don't talk about. Apologists don't exist to tell you the truth. They aren't interested in the facts. They exist to keep you believing. They are the motivational speakers of the religious world. They are there to tell the believer what they want to hear, so the believer keeps filling their collection plate with their hard-earned money. These are con men, nothing more. Now, they might actually believe this crap, getting high on their own supply, as they say, but they have no rational justification for any of it. And that's why we are not convinced by the crap tumbling out of their mouths. That's why they have to make excuses for why we're not becoming their fawning sycophants that they require. Because we're not dumb, and they don't like that. And it's why they play these childish word games instead of just dealing with the facts as they are. The religious are allergic to the facts. And that's why they believe all of this unsupported garbage.